Congratulations to Loki for figuring out the Easter egg of the last video. He not only figured out that I had said part 1, but he also had spotted some electronics in there that I didn't mention, which leads us to today's video. So today I'm going to take the gimbal from the last video and we're going to make it automatic. We're going to add some electronics onto it. It's going to be very simple, and I'm going to actually put in the description a link to a video that's not going to be listed, that's going to give the details for anybody that might find electronics a little intimidating. So let's get to it. So this is going to be the main stuff you need. There will be tools and other things not mentioned here, but as you can see, it comes out to be a really cheap price to make a gimbal motorized, coming in at less than $16. So I'm picking this spot to put the switch because of the fact it's right where I adjust it, and it'll be a nice convenient spot. As you can see, I've taken the electronics apart just to make it a little easier. So I'm going to scribe out some marks for the switch, and then I'm going to use my rotary tool to carve it out. And I made sure this was a nice snug fit. Now I need to drill a hole for the speed knob. Now since I can't bolt it back on, I've taken and I've etched around this hole, and that's going to allow the hot glue to have something a little bit better to adhere to. So now with the dab of hot glue, I'm just going to put that in place. And now put the knob back on. So now on the motor controller, we don't need this heat sink, as it's not going to be under a very high load. You'll need to make sure you take the screw out of it as well. Now I'm going to cut a couple small squares out of some of the scrap plexiglass. I've selected a drill bit here that just barely fits in these little spools, and now I'm going to use it just to mark a spot and drill through. And this is slightly off-centered so that way the spools won't come in contact. Now with a little bit of resin, I'm going to take and apply it to one of the spools, put the two together, and then use that same drill bit to just kind of hold them straight. That all dried up, now we can take and put the plexi on. I started off putting this nut on by hand, and then my patience got the better of me. And then my patience got the better of me and I did it by hand again. So now with that on, I'm just going to finish putting it on with the spools so I can make sure that they're not touching. I want to leave a little wiggle room. And I'm going to smash this nut down so it doesn't move on the shaft. This can be done with a center punch like I'm using here, or you can squash it with a pair of pliers or even put it in a vise. So now I'm going to put the spool loosely on there and then put another nut on there, but I'm not going to tighten it down all the way because I need to apply some epoxy. And for this I used quite a liberal amount. This is going to hold the spools to the nuts as well as the shaft. And with that applied to both sides, I can take and use the spools to tighten the exterior nut all the way down until it fits snugly inside of there. I also applied a little epoxy on the outside just to help secure it. So now I slipped a washer on here just to help protect it from the saw, and I'm going to cut off the excess of this rod. So now I etched in a couple guides to get it nice and square. I'm using a glue that's actually made for plexiglass, but I think the epoxy would have worked just as well. And no, I'm not using it the right way here. So now I can drill out the holes for the board. And I'm going to secure that down with some small bolts I had laying around. Now I'm hooking up the power for the motor here. When this project's done, if you find your gimbal goes the wrong way versus the direction of your switch, you just switch these two wires around. Now I've soldered the wires back onto the potentiometer, taking and cutting off the excess that was not needed. I'm going to drill a hole here, and this is going to be for the 9-volt battery wire to go through. And I'm simply going to run that through and hook it up to the board, making sure positive is on positive and negative is on negative. Make sure to pull the excess back through. So I'm skipping over the rewiring of this up, but I am leaving a link for an unlisted video down below that will give you much more details if you actually want to build one of these. Everything gets hooked up as normal except for this black wire. I'm going to take and drill a hole through for that. And on both corners I'm going to take and I'm going to mount one of these micro switches, and that's going to be our end stops. So taking that black wire that we ran through, I'm going to solder that to the outside of one of the leads, and then I'm going to jumper the other outside of the lead over to the other micro switch. So then the outside of the other end of the micro switch is going to go back to the board in the empty slot. So now with that done, if you notice with a little tension, this motor wants to twist, and we need to keep that from happening. So I just cut off 2 little pieces, and I'm going to glue them on either side just to hold that motor from twisting. Now I drilled a hole at each end of the gimbal for the string to run through. After tying on a string, I can let it wind up. I would highly recommend fishing string for this. But now I'm going to take and I'm going to put that on a spring on this side and attach it to that hole. I did end up switching this for a heavier duty spring, which you'll see in that extras video. Now I attach another string for the other spool, and this is going to get wound in the opposite direction. And after threading that through the hole, this side I'm just wrapping it around, and then I can take and tuck it into the bar here, and that allows me to tension it up as the string stretches over time. So now for some end stops, I took and I printed out these little pieces to go on here and glued them on. But you could do this out of just about anything, a piece of wood or a piece of plastic, just something for it to come in contact with. So for something to hold the battery, I could have used zip ties, but I wanted something that was a little easier to use. And I have some Velcro laying around, so I marked it out. Cut it out with the rotary tool. And strapped it down with this Velcro. So how this works is you adjust the speed to what you'd like, you set it in the direction you'd like to go, and then you just give it a little bit of a start. Once it reaches either end, the switch is going to come in contact with the stopper, and it's going to stop. So you can see in here, one of them is going to wrap up over and the other one's going to wrap up under. Well, that wraps up this project. If you're looking for the Easter egg for the next video, it was actually in part 1. So, can't wait to see you guys next time.